Welcome to your Daily 5 for Tuesday, April 18th, 2023. I finally got around to reading a book that has been on my list of books to read for quite a while and just got put off because other ones just kind of came up first, or I was really excited to read something else. But it was one of those where I knew I wanted to get to it, and I finally had a space in between reading books and got around to reading Legion by William Peter Blatty. I think Blatty is how you're supposed to pronounce the last name. This is, of course, the author of The Exorcist, and this book was initially started off as a sequel that was going to be done to The Exorcist. It eventually did become The Exorcist III, but it started off and it was originally going to be Blatty and William Friedkin, I think is how you're supposed to pronounce it, the director of the first film. And then apparently that movie got shelved for a while, and Blatty went ahead and completed the novel. And then the sequel was picked up again, and much of the story of Legion then made it over into The Exorcist III. But I had read that there were significant differences, that the core structure was the same, but that it really was a different story that felt like its own thing. So I thought, okay, I'm going to read this because I really like The Exorcist III. In fact, I like it better than the first movie. I know some people will find that to be blasphemy, religious pun, but and look, The Exorcist is more of a horror movie. If that's what you're after, the first film is definitely the better horror movie, but Exorcist III is just, to me, the more entertaining film to rewatch. I almost never, in fact, I think I've seen The Exorcist twice in my life, the original version and then the new version they put out, the complete or unseen cut or whatever, and that's enough for me. It's just not, that movie is not really for me, whereas Exorcist III, I really enjoy that film. So going into the book, I wasn't really sure what to expect because, as always, when you have a movie and a book that are largely the same story, there is the risk that the movie will inform the book, that you'll be seeing the characters of the movie if there's too much of a similarity. Fortunately, Exorcist III really is the same basic story, but with a much different set of tones and with major things that were excised in service of the film. Now, I think they were probably wisely cut. I think Exorcist III was trying to be an Exorcist sequel, whereas Legion, it doesn't really even give you an indication that it's related to The Exorcist. If you look at the book cover, it says a novel from the author of The Exorcist, but it doesn't specifically tell you that it is a sequel to that story. Now, once you get to a certain point, it becomes very clear that it is. And of course, if you're paying attention, the main character you would understand was from the first film. But the first 50 to 60% of the book really comes off as a police procedural, where you could have believed very easily that this was the lieutenant character from the first story that simply was investigating a serial killer. And that was all there was. That there might not be any supernatural or exorcist connection at all. And then at a certain point, it becomes clear that no, there is a connection to the first story here, and it's going to tie in majorly with the way the rest of the book unfolds. But it does feel, because Kinderman is a much different character, as well as in the movie Patient X, in this book it's called Sunshine, is the character who's being inhabited by the Gemini killer's spirit, being assisted by the demon from the first movie. But even though those main elements are the same and it unfolds largely in the same way until you get to the very end, there are things that are drastically different. Not different in terms of the plot. The plot essentially unfolds the same way. So if you've seen The Exorcist III, you will understand what's happening up to the very end. And it's not even that much that the ending is so different. It's just intended as a different type of ending. It's tough to explain it. I'll get into it when I talk about it on Friday. But the nice part is the book does not ever mix with the movie for me. Even though they are so close in many ways, I never for a minute had a crossover between the movie version of the characters and the book. The book felt like it was its own independent type of thing. And I think that's great, because if it was just a movie again, then it just feels like an adaptation. And if it's too different, then I don't know that I would have liked it as much. I probably would have if it was a different story. But I think it's really interesting to see how two versions of the same story can be told in two different mediums in ways where, in terms of the actual plot structure and story structure, it's the same, and yet they don't come off the same at all. Both are enjoyable and entertaining in very different ways. So I'm actually really happy I read it, and I'm very happy with the fact that it didn't feel like it was either a better version of the movie, in which case it dilutes the film, or the other way around. They both are really great works of the same story, but adapted in subtle and major ways to the mediums that they were presented. So I would absolutely recommend it. Again, it's called Legion, William Peter Blatty. Good book. Later.